Every week I get to see behind the scenes about the data of how many people are actually listening to this podcast. We have people in Japan, Australia, Southern America, and North America that are tuning in on a weekly basis to hear some of our incredible guests. But one of the best things to continue growing that reach is if you would actually hit subscribe or follow. This helps with the metrics so that way you are the first ones to get notified when new podcast episodes drop, but also continues to spread that reach to other individuals who might need to hear some of these incredible lessons that people are sitting on the opposite side of the table from me are sharing. So do me one favor today and hit subscribe. Thank you. Darryl Wilkie, thank you for coming in today. I know that you're the executive director of the Red Deer Dream Center, but there's a lot more behind the picture of what's going on. For those that don't know what the Dream Center is, can you get a bit of a background of what that building used to be and what that is today?
Right. So I didn't have first-person experience with regards to what it was, but it was a very active bar. We don't have a lot of bars in Red Deer, so anybody who did the bar scene was very, very familiar with it. Matter of fact, we've had clients who the last time they were in Red Deer were actually in that bar, and partly remember the occasion because of their alcoholism and in some cases drug addictions. And now to be back in this same building, really transformed, and now actually looking at finding their life and saving their life and recovery is profound to them. And we've had a number of clients where we've seen not only a transformation in a building, but a transformation in someone's narrative and their story.
One of the things that really stood out to me was you talking about how someone that could have experienced cocaine for a first time in that nightclub, and now they're in this building where they're becoming free of that.
Yes.
And that's such an incredible story arc right there in a building.
Yeah.
And so for those individuals that aren't familiar with addiction, what are the typical starting grounds that introduces addiction into life? Is it something that someone's wired that way? Is it a series of choices? What does that look like?
Yeah. You know what? That is a great question. And that's been a question for research actually for a long time. And so I've been in the field for a lot of years. I've been just a little over 35 years in mental health and addictions and a child and family therapist. And when I originally started way back in the early 80s or late 80s, there was a perception that, at least with alcohol, that it was still kind of a moral choice, but there was a little bit of on the preface of looking and going, well, maybe there's other factors that are contributing. Maybe it's just not a moral issue or an ethical issue. And so obviously they've done a lot of research since then and have discovered genetically, biologically, that a person actually has a predisposed disease. So they actually have the disease before they ever drink or use. It's just waiting for you to use. And once it is activated, then it's one's too many and 1,000's not enough. And obviously not everybody's the same. Not everybody's going to metabolize alcohol the same way. And so there is a percentage that, can have troubles with alcohol. And then one day they decide that I'm going to stop. And they do. They just decide to stop it. They see that what it's doing, this is problematic in their life, and they're able to arrest it. But for others, they start to realize this is problematic. Maybe they're losing things. They're losing jobs in their life. All the warning signs are coming up, and yet they can't stop. The very thing they don't want to do, they keep doing. The very thing that they want to do, they don't do. And so they end up in this terrible cycle. And until eventually, if it could rob them of everything. And so as long as a person continues to degenerate, the addiction continues to grow. And so what we know about the addiction, it's progressive in nature. And so it's just going to continue to get worse. It's just going to continue to consume the person. And really, the way that I look at it is everything is a relationship. Everything. And we're the center of every relationship. It could be a relationship with time. It could be a relationship with money. Doesn't really matter what it is. Relationship with people, relationship with a job. But who I am and what I perceive that relationship is going to bring to me is going to impact how I have a relationship with it. And so now, as a result of using drugs and alcohol, I start to realize that I'm having a relationship with this, but I started to have the relationship biologically and chemically first, where it did something. It did something to my brain chemically that opened up those dopamines. And so instead of kind of a single lane highway, the first time was a 16-lane highway. It was kind of the 401, and it was a full flush of dopamine. And so my experience could be very, very different than somebody else's. And so not only am I predisposed genetically, I also chemically and metabolically have a different reaction to that, how my brain responds to it. And now physiologically, I'm also going to have a change. Now, there's other psychological predisposing factors, like most people that turn to alcohol and drugs have grown up in dysfunctional families, and stress has not been managed well. So they actually haven't learned how to manage stress. And as a result, the household is stressed, but they also are stressed. And so now it's that pain-pleasure path in the brain. And so now they're kind of predisposed to trying to manage their emotions, manage their stress with short-term gain, long-term pain becomes the path and the pathology that they start to follow. So there are a number of factors, just what we call biopsychosocial and spiritual factors that predispose somebody, but in actual fact, genetically, they already have the disease.
So for those individuals that already have the disease, what can they do before it becomes something? Like, is it something that you can go get tested for?
Right.
Like, how do you know that maybe I'm predisposed for this?
Yeah. So for a lot of years, they actually were trying, they could see the markers, but they didn't know if the markers were as a result of using and now the markers exist, or that they pre-existed and now as a result of using, the markers just remained there. And they also know nationally. So there are certain nationalities that are much more predisposed in terms of how they metabolize alcohol specifically. And so that's a great question. I don't actually know if they can still at the place in the liver go and actually have a test to determine. However, all the pre-indicators would be there for them. So even addiction in the family unit, not that it has to pre-exist in the family, but if there's enough predisposing factors, then there's a very high risk of that person actually developing or having the disease.
I think oftentimes we hear the idea of it's a choice. And that can make sense to a certain degree, but I think it becomes dangerous.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts when people say, well, it's just a choice?
Yeah. Two things. Number one, I always say to the guys, two most powerful things in the world, words and choice. The words that you tell yourself, the words that you speak to others have the capacity to give life or death. There's no in between. And so the words that were given to you, especially in those early years, first 12 years before the age of reason, become truth to you, and you gave it meaning. But those words, if they didn't meet your deepest needs, really put you on a path of death. Really what happened. And now the words that were spoken to you, you've actually adopted and used those exact same words verbatim. But instead of saying you, now it's I am these things. And so that continues now in the psychology of the individual, and they stay stuck in that path of self-hatred, self-harm, whatever it kind of manifests as. And so now the question becomes, so what's my choice? Well, in actual fact, everything was a choice. Even the first time they used was a choice. They didn't choose the disease. They choose how they manage the disease. Somebody once asked me, how long, like, how can you be a therapist so long? Doesn't that kind of burn you out and discourage you and get overwhelmed with people's problems? And I said, no, the exact opposite, because I feel very privileged to be able to give choices. The difficulty is most people don't actually believe they have a choice. They don't. And so now they just believe that this is their path. This is who I am. I always talk about one's I amness. So what are you going to put after? And I actually have them do an exercise. I am, and fill in the blank. What is that? Because that's going to be quite revealing as to what your thesis statement is for your life, because that's the meaning that you've given to who you are. Now the question is, what's your choice? What do you choose? Because right now, you're choosing fear, and the pathology of fear will always lead to death, the fear of rejection and failure. Or you can choose life and hope. And so, but it's your choice. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out to you what the needs are. Even physiologically, my background is also in fitness and nutrition. I've kind of been trained in that, et cetera. And so I'm going to lay out the principles in terms of nutrition, in terms of leisure, in terms of recreation. I'm going to talk about what you need, even in terms of your personalities, how you perceive the world, how you process information, and even how you implement it, because it's unique to you. And so the question is, what do you need? Even who you are is impacting your choices. So what we want to do is look and see, what are the choices? What is going to meet my need? And that will actually give me life physically, biologically, psychologically, socially, spiritually, in every area of your life. But you get to choose. I will never choose that for you. I can lay it out, but you have the power to choose. And even if you choose death today and make some really bad decisions that have you going in the wrong direction, even nutritionally, then now you know that you don't have to keep on that path. You can make another choice that's towards health. And that choice isn't easy, and you need accountability and you need support, because you're naturally going to default to what you've practiced for a really long time. And I always say you get really good at what you practice. Practice does not make perfect, but it makes better. The question is, what are you getting better at? Right. This or life and love?
Yeah. And you're encountering people that are coming in at a crux of a life decision.
Mm-hmm.
I recently met with someone who is coming up on 7 years of sobriety.
Yes.
And so really excited and sharing his story. And he remembers the decision of, I need to go find help.
Yes.
He did a bunch of hard drugs at night, loaded a gun, set it on the kitchen table, and said, if I wake up, I need to resolve this. And if I don't, I've resolved it.
Yeah.
And just the reality of you're at this spot where you're making a choice of, I'm either going to end it tonight or I'm going to seek help.
Yes.
Is that oftentimes the intersection that you find people entering into the Dream Center, is they're at the spot where might be the lowest of lows?
So classically, we've often said that it's that hitting the proverbial bottom, right? There's nothing lower than this. And I think there's an element of truth to that. But again, we can't put everybody into a box. And so, but it does mean, and that's a clear example of am I going to choose life, or am I going to choose death? The fact is the choice has been made a long time ago. I've been choosing death for quite a long time by believing that this is going to meet my need, and it doesn't have the capacity to meet my need. It's actually killing me slowly. It could be food. It could be anything that's killing us slowly. And we know that because the number one cause of death for females is heart disease by the time they're 50. The number two cause for men is heart disease by the time they're 50. So we are already on that trajectory for a long time before we even just get to 50, the midpoint of our lives. But the problem with addiction, or the issue with addiction, is that expedites the process. So now instead of, I'm at 50 and kind of my lifestyle has brought me to this point, depending on the drugs I use, that can have me at that point by 20, 25 or 30. And so it's that kind of sick and tired of being sick and tired, and now out of desperation. And so that person may have a number of those moments throughout that time, and some won't make it to the next morning. Many won't make it to the next morning, and some do. And then that becomes that moment, the pivotal moment for them. But it doesn't have to be that dramatic. It doesn't have to be that dramatic in terms of life and death. It could be that the employer said, you know what, we're going to have to let you go. Or listen, we think you're great. You're a great guy, but we just cannot continue to have you show up drunk. And we're going to invest in you, and we want you to consider going for treatment, but you need to go for treatment, and we'll support you, and we'll see and see if we have a job for you when you're done that. And for that person, that's their bottom. It just depends on who they are, where they're at. It depends on, honestly, the drugs they're using or alcohol. They all have varying effects. But wherever that moment is, that person says, I can't keep doing this, that is their bottom. But that bottom will look dramatically different from person to person.
Do you find that other people can have an influence on letting them know where their bottom is? I mean, like a family, friend, employer that sees, hey, there's an issue here, but does that person need to come to terms with it themselves?
Yeah. So it needs to be their choice. Yeah. We see sometimes parents who are the catalyst to the individual coming for treatment, and you see that they're not willing to do the work. We've seen it in corrections, where, I can get a lesser sentence. And for that reason, we don't take people that are in the corrective system until they're finished serving their time or whatever it is. Otherwise, that becomes a motivating factor. I'd rather be here than in jail, right? And then you can see that they're just not committed. They're not desperate. This isn't life and death for them. It's just an easier path for them. And so typically with parents, and I'm one of those parents, we may end up enabling our children, or employers may enable that person because they're such a good worker and I hate to lose them. And so we just won't speak the truth to them. We'll avoid it because we're afraid that if we're really honest with them, we may lose them. And so to parents, it's the fear of losing them altogether, right? And as parents, you wait for the call, and you live in that, and it's not a great place to live for sure as a parent. But the reality is that at the end of the day, they have to come to a place where they realize for themselves that they need to make the decision. And so I always say the road to recovery is you have to trust something. So either you're trusting towards something to meet your needs that's moving you towards relapse, and it gets darker and darker and darker, which is fear, or I start to trust something that's going to move me towards hope, love, and life. And so the question, what is that? And I always say, well, you've been doing a great job trusting fear. What about the truth? How about if you start to trust the truth? And there's a statement that says, if you know the truth shall set you free. There's great truth to that, because that's true of every area of your life, that as long as you start to recognize that my needs are starting to be met physically, emotionally, relationally, they say, somebody doesn't know how bad they're feeling until they start feeling good. And so once you start to see the truth and understand the truth and trust the truth, if it's coming from somebody who's walked a mile in your shoes, who has some recovery, who's taken the risk to go through a program, that gives them hope, and that gives them life. And now they're actually making movement. They're trusting that person or trusting the program. It could be a 12-step program that moves them forward in their life. And every day they have to trust the truth. And so the question is for them, kind of, what is that truth? And so whether it's employers, whether it's the law, whether it's parents, whether it's siblings, they need to speak the truth and not fear the consequence of speaking the truth. But more times than not, it's not just the addict who's living out of fear. Most people are living out of fear, and they're afraid of what that person might do if I really laid out the red carpet and I stop enabling them and stop kind of pacifying them. It's too terrifying for some, and they just don't.
So how does someone move past that fear to have that real conversation?
Right. Well, sometimes you can't do it yourself. Sometimes you maybe can suggest a professional and just say, "Listen, I'll bring you down." And I'll tell you, we went through this with my son. He's having a really bad day. He's spun out in terms of paranoid because of crack, and I said, "Listen, why don't we go down to detox? Let's start there. Go to detox and see how that goes. Let's just talk to them at detox." And I'm a therapist, and this is my son. If anybody should know, be able to speak truth, it should be me. But the message is not determined. The meaning of the message is not determined by the sender. It's determined by the receiver, right? And so if my son's not ready to receive the truth, it doesn't matter what I say. And that's why we have to learn how to accurately and rightly divide the word of truth. And so maybe dad isn't the right person to speak the truth in this situation, or mom. Maybe it needs to be somebody outside of us, a professional. Could be a therapist. It could be, a service, whatever that. It could be a 12-step program. Let's go to a meeting together and have other people speak to them.
How does that impact your work, seeing your own son battling with addiction?
I think for me, I think we all battle addictions. And I'm not talking, full-blown addictive pathology, but we continue to put our faith in things that we hope is going to meet needs that doesn't have the capacity. The difficulty is we don't change it. We just keep going back and doing more of it. And the next thing you know, it starts to impact our life in a lot of kind of negative ways. And it doesn't have to have the same dramatic impact that that alcohol or drugs does at all. But yet there's a capacity to empathize with that. And I think in my world, it's given me empathy, a deeper empathy for not just the clients, because I've lived in addiction. Everything that I teach, I tell the guys, everything that I teach here, everything is my story. I do all of this stuff. I am not telling you one thing and doing another. This is my life. This is my story. And you get to either trust that or not. That's your choice. But I can only say through my narrative and my story, this is what it's doing for me. This is the life that it's giving me and the hope that it's giving me. And so as a parent, you feel powerless sometimes because you want them to get it and they can't. Sometimes as with clients, I want them to get it and they're not. They're just not ready. And it's just giving them permission. I always say it's not about pass and fail. It's about lessons. And we get to repeat lessons until we learn them. And so we just need to understand for the person who, whether it's my son or whether it's the clients I serve, I just realize that, this is their journey of discovery, as it was with me. And so I just realized we don't get it the first time around. Matter of fact, the average individual who comes for treatment will go through 7 treatment programs before they get it. And so you have to give license for that. You have to give permission for that, and to recognize that this is a process. It takes a long time to get sick. It takes a long time to get better. And so it's giving them grace and permission and realizing that words don't change anybody. Words don't change your belief system. Experience changes your belief. And so if we can give an experience that is going to impact them, and it may not convert them in a sense of their life is completely transformed today, but in this journey, they're walking out different than they walked in. And maybe at some point, something's going to click that they'll never use again. But I'm also a firm believer that this isn't about not using. It's not about putting a cork on something and just saying the objective here is to get them to stop using. Same with my son. It's not to say, Jeremy, I hope you never use ever again, right? Just don't use. The problem is that's only 20% of the problem. It's the other 80% that's the issue. It's the isms that drive it. And most of us have the isms. We may not choose alcohol and drugs, but we may have other self-defeating behaviors that we are pathologically continuing to be in and not meeting our needs. So for me, it's about them starting to recognize what that other 80% is in their life. And so that they can have an optimal level of health in all areas of their life. And it comes back to the choices. And that is to say to them, but it's your choice. This is your choice. My job is to give you the choice. That's it. It's not my job to fix you. It's not my job to change you. I always say the 3 C's. It's not my job to convert, conquer, or change you. Right. Not my job, not that powerful, right? However, I can give you choices in every area of your life, every area in terms of what you need. And so if you're willing to trust that, if you're willing to go there and challenge your worst fears, because that's the place where life changes. When we find that double bind of our fears and we're afraid to do this or afraid to go in that relationship, but we realize, no, I need to do the very thing that I don't feel like doing, but I know I need to do it. And if you're willing to have the courage to do that and make those choices, then you're going to see and reap the benefit of what comes out of those choices. And you will want to make more of those choices. But that's a journey of discovery.
Most people start with motivation. Very few start with a system. Last year, I didn't guess my way through goals. I used the same framework I'm sharing with you today. Here's what it helped make possible. It increased our net worth. We bought 4 properties, 2 on the same day, spent more intentional time with family and friends, received 2 promotions, and took a dream vacation. This wasn't hustle. It wasn't willpower. It was clarity, structure, and alignment. That's why I created the ultimate goal setting framework. If you're tired of setting goals that sound good, then disappear, this is for you. Download it for free at thecurrencyofhappiness.com and start pursuing goals in a meaningful way. So someone entering into the Dream Center program, what does that typical journey look like? Because I know that there's a high success ratio for the individuals that complete the program.
Right. Yeah. So the journey is different for everybody in a sense, as to what brings them here. Just like you said earlier, to one, it was the night before that it was life and death. To other, they just lost their job. To another, their wife just left with the kids. To others, it's just realizing this isn't the quality of life that I want, period. But they still have a job. They still have all those other pieces. And so they have to make the decision to step out of themselves, and whether it's going to a meeting or calling our intake. And in the intake, there's an assessment done. And in that assessment, they will determine at that point whether a person even needs a treatment center. Maybe they're not even at that stage. And so, maybe you just need a sponsor. Maybe you go to some meetings, get a sponsor, get some support, and you can continue with your job. You haven't lost everything. So just build that into your life. It's usually the guys who have lost everything that they need all the restructuring. That's where treatment centers come in, is because we have long-term issues in terms of life skills and other things, and they need to rebuild all the infrastructure in their life. So it needs a lot more intentionality and focus. And in some cases, they're even homeless as a result of losing so much. So that really becomes key. That's where treatment centers, I think, really come in. And even the length of treatment centers determine. I worked at a 28-day program. It was out of a hospital. This was years ago, and most of the people I'd seen there were doctors and lawyers and right, and they still have their jobs and their careers, but they're going to lose it all if they don't change. And so the writing's on the wall, and so they just need a good kick in the pants. They need to some stuff for them to really realize these are the commitments. This is your need. This is what the disease will do to you. This is what you need to do to move forward. And from a clinical standpoint and otherwise. A 5-month program like ours is really kind of taking somebody who's even that much more discombobulated in their life, dysfunctional in all areas of the relationships in their life. And so now they have to really rethink about all of their relationships and what do those relationships look like for them to be healthy moving forward.
And so for those individuals, as they're leaving the program, knowing that there may be a chance at relapse, is that a complete loss? Is that just a step in the process? What should they be viewing that as?
Yeah, exactly that. It's a process. It's a journey. When I wrote on one of the courses as a series of courses on addictions, I call it The Road to Recovery. And I think one of the things that we do a lot in our society is we make everything an event, as if, the event of I'm going to lose this much weight. And so this is the magic number. If I meet that magic number, celebration, right? Problem is then I can't maintain that number because life is actually a process. It's not the event. And so it's actually helping us to realize that everything has the capacity to grow us and to teach us. The good, the bad, and the ugly. It's all growing us. It's not bad is bad. It actually may be the best thing. I tell guys sometimes, the best gift I think I was ever given was a gift of addiction. I would not know what I know today. I would not be who I am today. I would probably not love myself the way that I love myself today if it wasn't for addiction. And I said, I wouldn't wish my life upon my worst enemy if I had one. But that's just the reality of addiction. And so just don't see it as pass and fail. It's not ever going to be about pass and fail. It's about growth and learning. And so what's the takeaway? What do you learn from this? Matter of fact, when I went to a client-centered model, this was a hard pill for even staff to kind of swallow. And that was, so if somebody uses, should they just be discharged because they broke the rule and they failed? And I said, well, no, absolutely not. Now, why would we do that? That would be completely counterintuitive to what we're actually teaching. The question is so you used, but so where are you now? What did you learn from that? What do you need to do moving forward? And it's really quite easy because they actually make the decision for me. So they come and I say, so, you failed the test or whatever. And so what's happened? And they go off and they blame and they're going down these garden paths and there's nothing coming back to them in terms of responsibility. And it's at that point, I'll have to say to them, listen, I don't think you're really ready yet to own what you need to own in order to move forward in recovery. And I can't have you stay here as long as you can't own it, because I have 25, 30 guys that I have to consider the safety on this floor. But I've also had people come to me and go, I need to tell you something. I had a relapse. I went to a meeting, I was coming back and somebody gave off or whatever. And I said, okay, let's talk. And they talk and they go, this is what I've done. This is kind of what I've discovered I need to do. This is actually the same thing happened to my son. And I said, don't make it all or nothing. That's the addict, all or nothing.
Right.
As a program, this isn't all about all or nothing. This is about process. This is about a journey and treating your disease. And so just like I was talking to my son one night after he had a lapse, and I said, just get back on the horse. You called me. I want you to call your recovery coach. I want you to call your sponsor, and I want you to hear from them what they need you to do. And one of them said, well, you need to go to 90 meetings in 90 days. You need to get back on the horse, and that's pretty intentional. And he did. He did 104 meetings in 90 days. And it actually changed him a lot. And not because he went to 90 meetings, but because his confidence started to grow. He started to build community. He started to be committed. And that's the process. That's the process. Not that he drank or didn't drink or used or didn't use. Same thing here. And so somebody comes to me and they say, yeah, no, I messed up. Okay, where do we go from here? And if they say, this is what I'm going to do, I say, okay, you know what? Now ups the accountability, right? Now these are the things that I'm going to have expected of you. This is what you're going to do. So now the gig is up. Okay, I love that you're here. Let's work through this together. And they can stay. So, but a lot of program directed centers, it will just be all in or all out, which is really, to me, what we're trying to break them from is all or nothing thinking and pass and fail. And so with a client-centered model, it removes that. It's really addressing them where they're at individually. And it's a lot more work to do that. It is. And it costs more from case managers and from the program to do that. But in the end, I think it's a win-win for everybody.
Would you be willing to share your own journey with addiction?
Mm-hmm. So my experience, really for a good number of years, I really started at about age 12, and I grew up, in a good old dysfunctional home, kind of very controlling father, lots of anger, lots of shaming in the home. He didn't manage his stress well at all. I would say was very condescending and mean, and probably even at times abusive to my mother. And so I was the youngest child, and obviously it affected all of us children. But I tended, based on my personality, internalized everything. And at the same time, he did lots of comparison to me, to my older brother, who was 4 years my senior, who was probably more athletically gifted, I would say intellectually gifted. And so I was being compared to and falling short. And so actually, by the time I was 16 years of age, I had not even read a book, not even a comic book. I just didn't believe I could read, and or that I'd be mocked or insulted. So actually for me to get through high school, it took me 5 years to go through a general program, and for me to graduate, they asked if I would go to a special needs school, and in going to a special needs school, if I would just write a resume, they would graduate me from high school. And it sounds so sad today. And yet the school system did not believe in me whatsoever. Family for sure did not believe in me. I don't know. I don't think I ever heard, even till his death, an "I love you" ever in the family. And so, which again is kind of classic to a lot of addicts. And all those things equate to a very, very, very low self-worth. And but it also perpetuates a tremendous amount of fear, because of the pain, you fear further rejection and further pain and further failure. And so in my life, around actually 17 years of age, I had a brother-in-law who actually happened to be an educator. and he's 9 years my senior. And that was actually my first introduction really to God in my life. I didn't grow up in a Christian home or anything. And he said, listen, my hockey was coming to an end. And he said, if you want to play on the hockey team, why don't you play church league hockey, but you have to go to church. And so I did. And I remember feeling really awkward and not really liking it at all, but I liked hockey. And so continued down that vein. And I'll just say this, throughout all of this, I was just actively acting out in my addiction, but very covertly. And I mastered the art of being really, really covert. And the way that I mastered it was to work really, really hard to compensate. And so even when I had come to know God, even as transformative as that was, now all I did was fear God as much as I feared my dad. And so it wasn't like, yay, I love you. This is great. I love you unconditionally. Fight what? And no, I just, butted love and said, no, I got to perform for him. And so he opened up the door, honestly, for me to continue in my education. I was going, no, I can't. My life is really kind of marked a lot by Moses saying, I can't. And God says, you can. And that has really been kind of my story. And so every time I'd say, no, I can't, God would go, no, you can. You're going to do this. And so I did, and end up actually taking a degree in education, ironically, and then went on to get a number of other specialties and diplomas and graduate degrees and blah, 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 all in attempts to overachieve, even in athletics, everything to the extreme, trying to be perfect, trying to be okay, trying to be lovable and acceptable. And meanwhile, as hard as I was doing this, I was acting out in shame constantly to medicate this constant feeling that I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. Until one day, I can almost virtually say all hell broke loose. And I was actually a therapist at the time. I was a pastor at the time, and basically just got exposed. And because of who I was, it went to the press, it went to radio, and my life was just over as I knew it, just like that. And I remember my wife at that moment. She had said to me, because she knew how hard I worked, how committed I am, and all those things. And she was shocked. She was surprised by all of this. And my kids were shocked and surprised. And she just said to me, Darryl, I only ask you to make me one promise. Don't do it. And she knew what I was thinking, that my life is over. It's done. I'm living out my worst fear. Worse. This is worse than my worst fear. This is a nightmare. And it's a nightmare that I get to wake up from. It's every day. And the impact on everybody. And everybody knew. All my family, her family, everybody knew. Around the city, like there was no secrets. Whatever, I'm reminded of David, when God said, listen, David, whatever you do in private, I'll make known to all men. And I went, wow, that's my story. That's my life. And that's ultimately what changed my life, because now I've facing my worst fears. And that from that point forward, that's when God started to rebuild and say, guess what? I love you anyways. But it took 10 years before I even had my voice back to speak, to write anything. I was driving trucks and just silent, doing my thing, labor, whatever. And so now that's what I do. I help others to discover that they don't have to live in perpetual fear and stress, failure and rejection constantly in their life, and that they can learn to love themselves. Matter of fact, I always say love is not this kind of divine God thing. God is love. But anybody, I don't care if they believe in God or not, if they come along and love you, guess what? They're being God with love on it. That's what love is. They're accurately assessing and adequately supplying your need. That's love. That's love. And if you get enough people doing that in your life, it's going to transform your life. If you're willing in your humility and brokenness to receive that, because then you will start to have hope. And hope is what brings you through recovery, because all you feel is hopelessness and powerlessness and unmanageability in those early days of recovery. And it's never regaining manageability and power. It's not about that. It's about recognizing that, yeah, my life is unmanageable and I am powerless, but with God, I can't do anything. With God, all things are possible. And that's my journey, is turning my will and my life over to the care of God. And really what it is the accurate assessment and the adequate supply of what I need. Not what I think I need, but what he knows I need. Today, I can say I'm in a position as executive director, not because of me, but because of my story and God in my story. Not the good, not the intellectual, not the academic, but the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's what makes me effective in what I do. And that's what I try to get our staff to understand and know. And I think they're buying into it. I want our clients to know that. Matter of fact, I had one of the clients just commenced. I've never had a client quote one of my books 3 or 4 times in a row in a commencement, but he was moved by it. He could relate to the story and to everything I was saying, and he said in it that one thing I've learned in this program, that God loves me despite me, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I thought, awesome. You embrace that. This is no longer about performance in your life. It will never be about performance. It will never be whether someone accepts you or rejects you. It will be you're exactly where you need to be. And I am the quintessential total of all the good, the bad, and the ugly of my life. Makes me effective in what I do. Not just the good things. It's all of it. And I am so humbled by that now as to how all of that, even the stuff at the time that I thought was horrific and terrible and failure, has actually worked out together for good. And that gives me great hope, not only for myself, but for them.
It's really powerful. You said that you'd written a couple books that are available on Amazon,
Yeah.
but they came from letters that you were writing to your children.
Yes.
If there was one message that you want to leave with your children, what would that message be?
Well, in my world, that it would be that to love themselves despite themselves, and to know that they are loved without any condition, from their Father, from God, and not because you feel like it, but because it's true. It's just true. And I don't always feel loved, especially when your house burns down. You're going, what is this about? Right? And all the bad stuff that comes after that. However, but do I have a confidence that God makes all things work together for good? Yes. Do I have a confidence in his love for me? And that even what looks like the bad thing is actually paradoxically a good thing, because it's much bigger than me. And I want that for my kids. They're getting it, but they have to learn that too, because it's not my words that change it. It's my experience and living out of this experience that gives them that hope and encouragement. But one thing we all have as a family is my life is an open book, and I'm very transparent, and it's given them permission to be transparent. And that's where love grows, that you're loving me and accepting me, even when I'm sharing those secrets, those things that I feel ashamed of. And yet you don't judge me, accept me, and just accept my humanity. And that's a great gift that I want for them.
Really good. Darryl, we have a closing tradition where I ask each guest, what does happiness look like to you?
Yeah. So for me, happiness is not, to sound cliche, happiness is not dependent upon happenings. I learned that a long time ago. For me, happiness is contentment with who I am, where I am, the good, the bad, and the ugly. For that, I am happy for where I am at, and that's a great blessing.
If anyone is wanting to find out more information or how they can be involved with the Red Deer Dream Center, what's the best avenue to do so?
Yeah, so you can go on our website. We have a number of different avenues, but Freedom Funders is really the biggest, I guess, sponsorship program, funding program that we have. And so we have all kinds, hundreds of actually people who may donate on a monthly basis from $40, $60, $100, a couple $100, quite a large range. And the Freedom Funders are the ones that we have really come to depend on from that day-to-day operational standpoint, because to know that we have the Freedom Funders and that commitment every month allows us to be able to kind of build those budgets. A lot of times with nonprofit charitable organizations, you'll have your fundraisers, and we're going to have our big walk, and we have our big walk in the fall in October, and we haven't picked a location yet, but it's a great walk. We've been able to raise actually hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is huge for our center. And you can see that on the website as well. So if you want to join that and be part of that, please do so. But we are looking for those Freedom Funders, and the level of commitment is really up to you. But please know that difference is really what's funding a bed. And so when we think about 30 beds, each bed costs $5,000. Now, I will say this. One of the things that's made this very appealing to not only locally here, but also kind of almost politically, is that if you look at the cost of most beds throughout Western Canada, it would be $20,000 per bed per month. And we're operating at $5,000 a bed. Now, partly in due because we pay rent where we're at, but we have a contributor that pays really the difference. The landlord is really paying and absorbing the difference on that mortgage, which makes it much more affordable and brings down the costs. And so we're thrilled that we can actually operate at that. But you think about $5,000 a bed, now you're looking at about $500,000 a year that comes by 30 beds being filled. And so our goal is really to kind of fill those, not only have the beds filled, but be able to have for that other really 40% of operations covered, so that we're not kind of going up and down the ebbs and flows of nonprofit charitable organization. The other thing that we're actually just in the midst of looking at, I got a meeting actually this afternoon with some folks, business people, who maybe would like to get involved with us with a social enterprise and woodworking and building outdoor furniture. And so just currently kind of going down that road again, just to help out financially. But even at that, we recognize that it's so important to have those core funders who continue to support, not just financially, but just in terms of in some cases, praying for the organization, for the clients that are in that in the center. That's what really we are dependent on at this point. So just look it up on our website, Freedom Funder. And if you had further questions, you can actually call and speak to Peter. And Peter's actually just came on as a new marketer for us full time. And so he would be more than willing to have further conversations around that too, or myself for that matter.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing, Darryl. The incredible work that you're doing at the Red Deer Dream Center and the impact that's having on so many lives, whether it's the people walking in those doors or the family, friends connected to those individuals. And then more than anything, just your transparency. I think that will shine out to so many other individuals and hopefully allow them to have really transparent conversations as well. So
yes,
thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you. I really appreciated being here.